Hello and welcome to this relaxing drawing session where I will continue working on top of this watercolor base and talk a bit about my thoughts and my process. My name is Alex, I'm a professional artist, and I recently got some new watercolors that I'm really excited about. They are super granulating, which is a concept I heard about in the past, but I never really looked into it. And the reason is that for the longest time, I've actually had a pretty complicated relationship with watercolors. I always loved looking at other artists' watercolor paintings, but somehow, whenever I used watercolors myself, I just didn't enjoy the way it felt and the way the paints worked. It was really frustrating, and eventually, about the time I was in art school, I just kind of accepted that watercolors weren't my thing, and I decided to put them aside. It was quite disappointing to reach that decision, but I'd given myself more than a fair chance to try and learn, and I just didn't see any point in continuing to use a medium that I just didn't like. But it wasn't all bad. The whole experience actually taught me something really important about art. It taught me that sometimes there can be a big difference between the art we like to look at and the art we like to create. Sometimes they're not the same thing. Sometimes they can even be polar opposites. I'm sure most artists can relate to the experience of looking at a piece of art and feeling this strong sense of wonder and amazement. When a piece of art makes you feel like that, it isn't so far-fetched to think that it might inspire or motivate you to create similar works of art. And if you've had that experience, did you ever try to create similar pieces of art yourself only to realize that it just wasn't enjoyable to you? I've certainly had that experience, especially in the early years of my artistic development, before I'd sort of grown to understand my own style and taste. So when I was in my second year of art school, I'd gotten to the point where I just accepted that watercolors weren't right for me at the time, and so I cut my losses, put the watercolors aside, and focused my energy on other mediums that I actually liked and that inspired me to create. Throughout my professional career, I've been predominantly a digital artist, but over the last few years, I've started to feel this really strong pull back to my roots, which is in traditional art. I still love to work digitally, and it's what I do for a living too, so it's important to keep practicing and keep improving. But I also realized that I really missed holding an actual brush in my hand, getting paint on my fingers, and feeling the texture of paper and canvas. I never stopped making traditional art, even when I became a professional, but work did take up a good portion of my time and energy, and I wasn't able to treat my traditional art as more than a hobby for so many years. It can be really tough finding that time between work and all those adult responsibilities that we have to do, but I think you get my point. So over the past few years, as I've rediscovered old mediums that I once loved so much, and also found a few new ones that I've never tried before, I kept feeling a certain curiosity for my old nemesis, those good old watercolors. Somehow I knew that the time had come to give them another try. I was curious to see if perhaps after all these years, something had changed. I knew my skills were miles ahead of where I'd been back when I decided to put my watercolors aside, but I also knew that that wasn't the only thing that had changed. I had changed a lot both as a person and as an artist. And so had my taste, my approach, my focus, and my ability to see mistakes not as failures but as opportunities for discovery and growth. So I pulled out my good old watercolor set and just played around with them. And as it turned out, it really did feel different to me using watercolors after all these years. I was no longer trying to achieve a style I wasn't comfortable with. I'd stopped chasing perfection. I'd gotten to the point where my curiosity was in charge and my focus was on having fun, playing and experimenting. I still struggled a bit with my watercolors, but only because the medium was unfamiliar to me. But those imperfections that I'd struggled so much with before actually seemed appealing and interesting to me now. And recently, as I mentioned, I've discovered those super granulating watercolors, which I use to create the base layer of the sketch. They create this really cool effect that is kind of similar to something I've done in my digital art for some years. And when I realized that I could create a similar effect with watercolors, it just blew my mind. I found that I absolutely loved working with these watercolors. I only got a few different colors initially because I just wanted to try them out a bit before spending a lot more money on them, considering my history with watercolors and all that. This sketchbook spread that I'm working on is actually the first time I'm trying these watercolors out, and I'm just sort of doodling a little bit, drawing some mossy rocks. The watercolor palette I got was quite earthy and narrow, and when I tried them out, I wasn't thinking at all about the values. I just wanted to see what the different colors could do. When the base layer was dry, I decided to bring out my trusty colored pencils and spice things up a little bit with more contrast and saturation. I really love using mixed media like this. I love the different textures you can create and the effects you can achieve, and it just inspires me so much to create. I think it's really important for many of us artists that we really do try to stop chasing perfection and allow our curiosity and playfulness to guide us instead. Perfection is an illusion. It doesn't exist. And if we try to achieve it, I believe that we're only getting in our own way and stopping ourselves from actually growing. It's a waste of our time and energy. In my own experience, the moment I crossed that threshold, the moment I actually stopped caring about achieving perfection, that's when I was able to unlock the next stage of my development. I'm curious if any of you have a similar experience, or if you're still battling with perfectionism. What's that struggle like for you? Have you found a way to get past it, or are you still looking for a way? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for spending time with me, and before you leave, remember to like this video if you enjoyed watching and consider subscribing to my channel. I share tips and tutorials for artists as well as my own creative journey, so go ahead and subscribe if that sounds like something you like. Stay creative, and I hope to see you again soon.